dealing with like square circles or something like that, I think of everything in terms of like probabilities. Like this seems like really probable. This seems like really, really, really like if you told me you came here on a time machine from the 27th century, I wouldn't say that's impossible. I'd say that's really, really, really improbable, and I'd have to see some really good evidence for it. But yeah, so I regard open theism as extremely problematic. But so I would say like tiny, minuscule probability. And that's just in terms of maybe I don't have a full grasp of what knowing all things for all time would entail. And maybe there is some reason that certain things that we haven't done yet can't be known or something like that. But yeah, until I see an actual like contradiction. Uh-oh, hang on. We got something here. Uh-oh. Whoa. Hang on.
What's up?
Uh-oh.
What's up?
Hey, we got David S. David S.
Oh,
showed
we
up.
got the Mexican David in the building.
Hey, David S. Why are you completely misrepresenting Jake's position the entire time? And not only that, misrepresenting all of Islam. There is no classical Muslim scholar who believes what you stated as fact in your book and then build all kinds of dilemmas out of it. And you were just spouting gibberish the entire time, straw manning Islam.
Dang. Can't believe it. Can't believe it. If that's the case, well, number one, nice to see you, Jake. It's good to actually see that you're trying to converse about it. Not going to lie, I think you're probably one of the only Muslim Dawa people out there who is willing to converse about this stuff. So I appreciate that.
Are you actually Mexican, by the way, or are we just joking about that?
Oh, no, I'm Puerto Rican.
Okay,
hey, guys, just everyone,
we should probably stop saying that then.
Yeah,
I mean it's whatever, dude. It's like
Puerto Ricans are pretty laid back. They love being called Mexican. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I've noticed lots of different people they get mad if you call them by the wrong country. I just wanted you guys to know I do have to jump up at a couple times. There's no nurse, and so I have to make sure that someone is with my kid. Otherwise, my wife is staying up all night. So I'll be jumping out and back in and so on. But I'm guessing I don't know if you guys are going to have your discussion now or plan your discussion, or David, you want to respond to some things and so on?
I just want to say to the Puerto Rican David that I initially came on and said that I would be willing to have a discussion or a debate with the two of you on some of the things you presented. But I think now, after I gave pretty much my whole playbook to David, I don't know if he's even going to be willing to do that, because I think maybe he's going to come around and say, okay, Jake, you're right. So there's really nothing to debate. But,
all right, David S., do you accept defeat that you have said a bunch of things? He has corrected you, and maybe there are some dilemmas.
Well, I don't even know if he was listening. Yeah. Was he listening?
Yeah. Were you listening?
No, I actually just hopped on like 5 minutes ago. So
yes, he wasn't listening. I'm saying DW. I'm saying David Wood might be willing to accept that, but he hasn't heard anything, so obviously he doesn't have an opinion on it. He doesn't even know what I said. So
yeah, I mean, all I can say is like obviously
I mean I have a little bit more time. I don't want to steal the show with the stream, but I'm willing to stay on for.
You can. He's the one who showed up. You could have been on your way out, but he showed up.
Yeah. So but I don't know what your plan is here. If we're really like,
honestly, I just wanted to chat because I didn't get a chance to really hold on. But
yeah. Hey, David, I have to jump up real quick, but just to recap, Jake jumped in, said you're a complete loser. But he said you're getting a lot of things wrong, and I asked him a bunch just so that there's no misrepresentation in the future, because he was saying we could have a discussion, or he actually said debate about this, and like a 2-on-2 debate about this, but he said you're wrong on. He said you're wrong on a bunch of things, and so the idea would be. So I asked him a bunch of questions just so like to clarify exactly what his position is. So you can check that out later. But I asked him a bunch of questions about what his position was on various things. With that said, I'm going to step out real quick. You guys can converse amongst yourselves.
Really quick, David, just ask you really quick. Are you opposed while you're away of David and I talking about some of the things we already discussed? Is that okay with you?
No. I'm totally laid back, man.
All right. So go ahead. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I just want to say I'm going to be very honest. I watched a stream earlier today when I was receiving medical treatment because I was at the hospital all day, and it was entertaining. It did entertain me while I was bored by myself. But I thought that, and it's not only me, like I had a bunch of different Muslim friends messaging me because I was on the thumbnail naturally. So they're like, Jake, you're on the thumbnail and it says heretic. Yeah. Guys are saying you're wrong about all these things. So, but pretty much all of my friends who know anything about these topics were just flabbergasted. I mean, from our point of view, you just were misrepresenting like 95% of the stuff that was being discussed. Now, I went over some of those things with David, mainly by him questioning me. I don't have a problem doing that here or having a back and forth discussion. But I'm just going to be honest. I put together like a 20 to 25 minute clip of everything that I had pretty much everything that I had a problem with what you guys were saying. And I was planning on doing a video reacting to that, but I'm happy to talk about it here.
Sure. Yeah, well, I appreciate that you had a chance to look through it. That's great. I hope you don't have further medical troubles in the future. That's too bad about that.
I have MS, so I have a chronic disease, multiple sclerosis. So, yeah, there's no known cure right now. So, yeah, I'm stuck with it for now.
Oh, understood. I'll be praying for that. Yeah, I don't mean to misrepresent. Obviously, I was trying to go through what I can see from different Wahhabi writers and scholars about various topics. So at the beginning of some parts of the cross-examination, when you said that Allah doesn't will the preservation of the Quran on earth, and then a few minutes later you said that he does will, by his will and power, the preservation of the Quran, I think you can understand why that might be a little confusing just hearing those.
I don't think that happened. I don't think that actually happened.
Okay.
And if I ever did say that God doesn't will the preservation of the Quran on earth, I'd have to look at that because I honestly don't recall saying that, and I don't know what I would have meant in that context about that. But our position is that the what I think we were referring to before that was David Wood was trying to make a distinction between prior revelation, because naturally you're talking about the Islamic dilemma. So he was trying to make a distinction between prior revelation, like the Torah and Injil, versus the Quran. And basically he was trying to say, well, why did God will not to preserve the Torah and Injil on earth, but he did, he preserved it in the preserved tablet. And on the opposite, he preserved the Quran on earth, but he didn't preserve the Torah and Injil. So that's my position. That's what I thought I said. So if I slipped up and said that the Quran is not preserved on earth, I mean, that would be very strange, right? Like,
again, I didn't press hard on it because 2 minutes after you said it, you said exactly what you said there. So I figured it was just like, some sort of response that was not full or complete. So I think it makes sense to say that Allah's will is one, right? Like Allah's will is not divided. It's one, it's complete, for the sake of like saying that God's not composite or divided or has parts or anything.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. What do you actually mean by that? Because a lot of those terms are kind of loaded and they're debated between theologians. So what do you mean by that? What do you mean by one, or the opposite of one, composite? What do you mean by these things? What are you thinking about?
Yeah. So when I see like Muslim scholars saying that Allah's will is not divided or contradicted against itself, or no attribute of Allah is like contradicted against itself, as like some of these foundations of Tawheed, then I'm assuming, at least on the part of the will, it's the idea that Allah, since he is, in many Islamic schools considered timeless, right? And his attributes by extension are like these uncreated, timeless aspects of him, then it would be true that like Allah is also willing timelessly, before creation, Allah is willing timelessly.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. Yeah. So do you think the quote, and I'm just using your terminology because that's what you used in the discussion. Do you think that the Wahhabi position is that God is timeless?
I'm not exactly sure. It's a little confusing between different Wahhabi scholars. Like some would either say that Allah creates time, but I didn't see many that said he creates time exactly. Other ones said that he's just like eternally existent and without temporal relations, but then he acts in time when he makes creation. So it sounded like he went from being timeless to in time, and I was kind of confused by that. It actually sounded quite similar to William Lane Craig's position. When I heard that, I was like, oh, that's strange. It's like a Kalam position.
But I mean, much of what you said, I mean, we could literally go through the clip that I put together if you want, because I don't want to misrepresent you. Not everything is clear in my head. But from what I remember and the fact that you just brought it up now, it seemed that a lot of your dilemmas or problems or whatever you want to say were predicated on the idea or claimed that I was misrepresenting the Wahhabi view, let's say. Were predicated on this idea that God is utterly timeless. In fact, I think at one point you said that he is, what was the way that you phrased it? You said something like, oh, he's like eternally static. I think that's what you said. I think you said that the Wahhabis believe that God is eternally static and timeless and things like that. So it seemed like much of what you said was predicated on that idea, but then when you're talking about it here now, you're saying that you're not sure, and it seems like even some Wahhabis are saying something similar to William Lane Craig. So that's really,
it would still say that he's like timeless prior to creation. The confusing part is this: I don't see a Wahhabi that strictly says Allah like ceases to be timeless. He just starts to have time-bound actions while not having a change to like his essential timeless nature. So,
but what would that mean? What would that even mean?
Well, that's the confusing part. Exactly right? That's confusing to me. And also, most of it was actually predicated on the idea that his will is immutable, not essentially on his timelessness. So the immutability of his will, like the unchangeableness of his will prior to creation, is the thing I focused on more than the timelessness. I think.
Okay, let's talk about that then. So,
okay,
what do you mean by his will is immutable? Because immutable to me means that it's not subject to change, and most people take change. Well, I mean, it's debated what time is, but a lot of people take time to be a measurement of change. So they're directly related to each other. So, what do you mean by God's will is immutable?
Okay, perfect. So, if the Wahhabi position is it correct to say that the Wahhabi position is that Allah's will is immutable?
But that's what I mean. I have to understand. I have to understand I could, in a sense, use it that way, but I don't know what you mean by immutable. So I want you to explain to me what you mean by immutable, and then I'll answer the question based upon how you understand it.
Yeah, so from what I can see from the Wahhabi scholars, your definition is what I was assuming Wahhabi scholars intended by immutable, right? That it's not subject to change.
And by subject to change, you just mean temporal succession, like a before and after relation?
I mean, that along with like other things that might potentially cause change. But sure, since you had mentioned before that one example of change would be time as a measure of change, then if immutable means not being subject to change and time is a measurement of change, then of course Allah's will being immutable means it's not subject to time.
Right. And so there would be no sort of before and after to, and by will, do you mean the faculty by which God performs actions? Is that what you mean by will?
From what I can see amongst the Muslim scholars right now, I know there's the two wills. I think I made mention of that in the presentation, right? There's like the universal will, and then there's like the legislative will. But from what I can see of the universal will, it's some sort of eternal attribute of Allah by which certain decrees come to pass with necessity.
Okay. And so God performs actions. Does he perform action under the Wahhabi view? I'm asking how you understand it. Do you think that the Wahhabi view is that God's will is the attribute by which he acts?
I think is confusing because a lot of the Wahhabi scholars are quite unclear on that. They just say it's his will. And if you look at like the universal will, they say this attribute of his will, this universal will, is just the means by which all things come to pass. So if you say his actions, then sure, you could say that his will is his ability to bring all things to come to pass. The things he likes and the things he doesn't like, the things that he loves and the things he doesn't love. His will is the thing that brings all of it to come to pass.
Okay. And in the case of the will being immutable, so basically, are you saying that all of God's actions or willings, so to speak, are eternal? Is that what you mean by it being immutable?
Well, just as you said before that you measure or you define immutability as like not having change, not being subject to change, and then you also said that time would be a sequence of changes. By definition, if his will is immutable, that means it's not subject to temporal changes, so it is a timeless will. So, right, that would be like the Wahhabi position would be that if those definitions hold, then his will would be timeless. Therefore, the means by which all of these different events or actions that he wills in the universal will, the means by which all those come to pass would be timeless as well, because it's a timeless will.
Okay, so then that's what you think the Wahhabi view is. Then when it comes
based off the definitions you just gave me too, you told me you view immutability as like not being subject to change, and then you said time is a means of measuring change, right? So if I take your two definitions, it would make sense to say, since it's not subject to change, it's not subject to time, therefore it would be timeless. Would that be like...
Right, but do you think that's what the Wahhabi position is? Do you think that they believe that God's will is immutable in the sense that it's not subject to time?
Yeah, that seems to be correct. If your definitions reflect the Wahhabi position, then yeah.
Okay, and where, besides me talking to you now, because I'm just talking about the words, what source would you go to justify this? You don't have to even give it to me now. I'm just wondering what is in your mind about that. Like where have you read that the Wahhabi position is that God's will is not subject to time, let's say?
Well, that's a good question, right? So if it's true, and mind you, in the presentation, I actually made distinctions. I actually showed the parts where you do agree with the Wahhabi position, but then I explained how I think the Wahhabi position leads to a dilemma collapse, right? So even if a Wahhabi says one thing, I would say, well, no, that leads to a logical issue or a modal collapse. And so let's say that according to the Wahhabi scholars, the will of Allah is considered to be an eternal attribute of himself, which is by definition immutable, right? This will of his, if it's immutable, therefore it's timeless. Therefore, if it's an essential attribute of Allah that's timeless, then Allah would be timeless as well, right? Allah wouldn't have parts of him that are timeless. He would just be timeless.
Mm-hmm.
And so if
do you think that that's problematic? Do you think that a view of God being utterly timeless and immutable in the way that we describe, not subject to change in terms of his essence and all of his attributes, do you think that's a problematic view of God?
No. It's actually the set of various views all being brought together, right? So when I'm critiquing the Islamic position, I'm critiquing Tawheed in combination with immutability, in combination with timelessness, right? So, for instance, if the Wahhabi position, just to like try to, or actually not even the Wahhabi position, if there was a Muslim position that asserted that Allah was kind of like what R.T. Mullins would say, right? R.T. Mullins is a great Christian philosopher, and he believes that God is time.
You know, he's a good friend of mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You know, he's amazing.
Ask him about.
No, he's wonderful. I love R.T. Mullins, but
I'm in the footnote of his of some of his academic works.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. Wait, I'll have to check that out. That's great. His book, The End of the Timeless.
He's one of my. He was one of my professors in my master's program.
Did you go to? I'm
not gonna say where I went because.
Oh yeah. Never mind. Yeah.
You know, we've got doxers here, right, Thaddeus? So
yeah.
I mean, not here. But,
probably
in existence, yes.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, no, I'm just not going to disclose that just for that reason.
Never mind. I was going to say the place he taught, but you're right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's safe.
I mean, to be fair, he currently teaches at a few different universities. So, but just by me saying that, if people want to dig, maybe they can find it.
Yeah, maybe not. That's all right. Everybody forget that anything was said. Jake's cool. Don't dox. So, I wouldn't say it's the idea of just a timeless God per se, right? I would say it's the combination of, and I think I actually talk about this in my book. It's the specific combination of tawhid, right, with the nature of like Allah willing in accordance with His perfections and His wisdom, which also, of course, views Allah's own attributes as perfections. And that being in combination with like His immutability of will, all those things together form an issue, right? So if there was a Muslim position that saw God as
just genuinely trying to understand what does that combination what is the issue that falls out of that, of tawhid, immutability, and with His wisdom, or acting by His wisdom?
Yeah. So the positions I keep on hearing from Muslims is that like Allah is truly, like, essentially immutable in terms of His will, right? And in the exact same definition that you applied, not subject to change, and as you also followed up with, you said time is a measure of change, so Allah's will is not subject to temporal changes either. Well, if that's the case, then we're using like a strong form of immutability, and that kind of immutability, right? Like this essential immutability that also has to do with the actions that flow out of Allah. That strong immutability does lead to some problematic issues, because it's not even dealing with like, Allah's with temporal changes or sequences, which would
cut out on my end for about 5 seconds there. I don't know if it was also for them, but it was on my end. You said that the problem is not just immutability, I think, and then it cut out. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, I'll try again.
It might have been on my end. I just didn't hear you.
That's right. So the problem is not just like immutability, but that strong immutability, right, that seems to be part of that definition, right? So the definition you're using, and that definition that, again, it seems like some Wahhabi scholars are using, but it's tough because then they don't go as deep as a lot of other Muslim scholars in different camps might go in terms of like the exact philosophical strength of the language they're using. And so that strong type of immutability where Allah is always doing, I'll even make it a weaker form of immutability. Allah is always doing the kind of things, right? So just to be like more fair, Allah is always doing the kind of things that He's always been doing. Well, there's kind of an issue there, right? Because if I say Allah has always been doing the kinds of things that He's doing, well, then I should be saying that Allah is like eternally speaking, because then when Allah, through some sort of intermediary or some sort of means or act, creates the universe, then I could say that Allah has, eternally been speaking. So when Allah does revelation, which is like these moments where His speech, His eternal speech, becomes temporally manifest, then that's not going to be like as much of an issue, right? But if you say that He hasn't been eternally speaking, it's just His ability to speak, then it does sound like He's actually gone from like a change in the kind of thing He's been willing, right? So that critique, and again, when I'm doing my dilemmas or critiques, it's not predominantly focused on just if you agree with the Wahhabi scholars. The critique is, all right, if these claims uphold what some Wahhabi scholars are saying, then that would be a dilemma for those Wahhabi scholars or for people in the Wahhabi camp. Even if those Wahhabis don't know that there's like a dilemma there.
Is the strong immutability claim, let's go with that, or even if what you said about weak immutability in the way that you characterized it, are those and then God having revelation at a particular moment in time, you're saying that that's problematic? Why would that be problematic? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Those are good questions. So those are problematic in the sense that if Allah hasn't eternally been doing the kind of thing, right? So just going with even the weak immutability, where, all right, Allah can go from not doing a certain thing to doing a certain thing, but He's always been the same kind of being, doing the same kinds of things, same categories of things. Yeah. If we have to say then, okay, well, at least what kind of things has He been doing prior to creation that explains the actions he's doing after creation, right? So in my book, I explain that we could say the God of Christianity is eternally relational, right? He's eternally relational. If you want to parse that out in terms of like God is omnitemporal in like the R.T. Mullins view, where God has time as an attribute, right? Or if you want to go with like a modified view, like the classical Thomistic timelessness view, in either case, we know that God has always been the kind of being that sees relationship with other entities as a good thing. The God of Islam does not have eternal instantiations of relationships as like part of his essence and being. And so if we're just going with even more simple, right, like an inference to the best explanation, and I think I mentioned this in the book too, right? Not all of these dilemmas have to be like necessary logical dilemmas. If a Muslim has a weaker version of it, you could say, well, then let's just go with inference to the best explanation, like a lot of scholars do. Which model of God seems to explain creation better? A God who has not been eternally related to another entity or person or something, and therefore does not see eternal relationship as a axiologically meaningful pursuit, or a God who has been eternally relational and therefore sees relationship with another entity or person as something axiologically meaningful and worth pursuit. I would say, oh, okay, the one that sees relationship as a good thing is the one that would make a thing to be related to, i.e. a universe, rational agents, angels, humans, stuff like that. And so the book, I know we only went through like 6 dilemmas out of 100 or whatever, but I think this inference to the best explanation could still apply to each of these dilemmas to kind of help people think, well, which model of God actually explains this better? And,
okay, so now it seems like you're saying it's not, in the particular discussion we're having now, is not based upon a necessary inference, right? There's not like a logical inference that necessitates.
Well, it could. Yeah. It could, right? So the issue is, because, mind you, this is just how philosophy works a lot of times, people can be in the same camp but still using different definitions. So since I know that's just how scholarship and philosophy works, I allow people to say, okay, you're probably going to talk with a Muslim, just like how obviously you could talk with like 2 Thomists, right? 2 Thomistic Christians. And you'd probably end up at some point being able to find Thomists who have like a different specific understanding of timelessness or like pure actualization, like pure act with God, act as purest.
Do you have a particular view on these questions, by the way? Are you a Thomist? Are you
I used to be an existential Thomist. I don't really hold to like the pure existential Thomism anymore, and not so much to the like exact forms. I think someone who does a pretty good job exemplifying my view is someone who would be a good example. He's a good scholar for this, because like R.T. Mullins has some good stuff here and there that I think is like meaningful, even if I disagree with him on some points. I think he's got some good, meaningful approaches to how he summarizes things. Idol Killer on YouTube has like good models for dynamic omniscience that allows for like strong relationality.
I didn't hear what
Idol Killer on YouTube. Okay. So he's good.
We actually briefly talked about that earlier. So are you sympathetic to open theism?
Not to like that form of open theism. I think that open theism, the claim that you can't know the future, is an issue. Obviously, though, I would hold to somewhere more like, I don't know what to say, if it's like an essentialist Thomistic view, or like maybe an analytic model. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I'd parse out God's relationship with time. And so I'm trying to see exactly what I would do with that. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I'd parse it. But all this to say that when I say it doesn't have to be a logical inference of necessity, I'm saying as you're talking with people, you'll probably find a Muslim who is in a Wahhabi camp, or maybe any of the other camps that I've described in the book, who end up saying, well, I don't hold to that strength of it, right? For instance, there's people who hold to like strong divine simplicity in the Christian tradition, and people who hold to like a weaker version of it. So obviously, if we're using the same term, divine simplicity, we have
a view on that?
I think that divine simplicity in its like strongest Thomistic form has some issues. I think that, like the weaker forms of divine simplicity, kind of like how inspiring philosophy says it, right? Divine simplicity is what does he say? It's a luxury, not a necessity, right? So it's not going to cause any like essential modal collapses, but it might be better to approach understanding God better through like the philosophy of mind. And so, which I'm actually more sympathetic to. I'm actually more sympathetic to the idea that the one being who exists as three persons could be like analogically described in some sense as one divine mind, in which there are like three loci of consciousness that have full identity with that one divine mind, or like three, asymmetrical relational states, right? So in either way, I think the philosophy of mind can actually help a lot
But
with those models of
sorry to
God.
cut you off. I just really want to understand this, like, try to kind of simplify for the audience, because a lot of people probably don't know what we're talking about, right?
Sure,
So
yeah.
do you believe that God's knowledge, his attribute of knowledge, is identical to his attribute of will? Do you think that they're the same thing, that
No,
they're identical?
that would be like a strong type of like identity, or a strong type of divine simplicity.
Okay, so you would hold more to like a Mullins type of view, in that sense that the attributes are not identical to each other or to the essence. And then it also seems like you're not.
Potentially. I'm still trying to figure out exactly, because R.T. Mullins has like really good responses to a lot of questions, but then also like I see, St. John Chrysostom early on in the Christian tradition allows for some like open approaches. So I'm still trying to figure out where I land exactly on some of that.
Do you hold you don't have to say it if you don't want to. I know some people are shy about this, but do you belong to a particular church denomination?
Yeah, well, okay, I do, but I guess it's basically as close to like non-denominational as you can get right now.
So you're like a Protestant non-denominational. Okay. So
yeah, obviously I have a tradition that I wish I held to, but not really an option in my area.
Oh, and do you mind saying what that is, or not really?
No, I can't speak to that. God willing, maybe he'll bring me into that tradition in the future. We'll see, but
okay. No, I'm not trying to press you. I'm just asking so that I can understand where you're coming from. That's all.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's fine. Like for instance,
I'm familiar with the different schools in Christianity. So that's why I'm asking, because it just kind of helps shortcut some of these things. So
like I'll say it like this.
It seems like to me, to be very honest with you, it seems like you kind of have a similar position to David, where you're like, a lot of these things are complicated. They're difficult to understand. You don't really have like a set position on, or like a dogmatic position on all of these different things. And that's fine. I mean, that's fine for you. You can follow your own conscience, but I just find it weird that if that's the case, how would you be using any of these type of arguments against Islam, or certain models of God, or certain views in Islam, if you're not really dogmatic on any of these questions anyway? So it seems like eventually the issue gets reduced to God as quote unquote Unitarian or unipersonal, that he's one person. And so it seems like really that's the main crux of the problem for you, not any of these questions about God's timelessness or lack thereof, or his will, or anything like that. It seems more so to be a difference between Trinity, three persons, and Unitarian, whether it be Unitarian Christian or Unitarian Muslim. That's really seems to be what your problem is.
Well, I think that's actually something I lay out in the book pretty clearly, right? I try to actually keep it to like 4 main claims or attributes. And so I would say that's a pretty correct statement, because that's exactly what I say in my book. I don't really like try to hide, behind any wall. I'm saying the very notion of a Unitarian God who values relationship, despite having like an immutable set of axiological preferences, or an immutable wisdom by which certain choices of will or action come about, it doesn't seem to explain as much as a God who is eternally relational, eternally tripersonal, right? Or at least eternally multipersonal, and therefore sees relationality, active relations, causal relations, as being significantly more valuable than a Unitarian one, right? So obviously, yeah, I can understand your confusion, but if I find and if I give good reason to say that a multi-personal God makes more sense for moral facts like moral ontology, aesthetic facts, aesthetic ontology, the very nature of revelation, divine revelation, the nature of creation, the existence of a universe, and I hold that a multi-personal God has stronger explanatory power than what you would find in a unipersonal God, then I think that automatically makes for like a more meaningful claim. Is it possible to say all of that while still saying I'm trying to figure out where I view God's relationship to time? Even though I do find R.T. Mullen's approach to time being an attribute of God very attractive. Yeah, sure. Those are things I should figure out, and I'm prayerfully considering those. Don't get me wrong. I've been trying to for about a year to figure out where I land in the Christian tradition. But that still doesn't detract from the actual arguments, because my arguments were predominantly on the type of immutability and the type of the nature of Tawhid for my book. Now, in my conversation with David,
are they together? This is what I'm really trying to parse out. Okay. Is it the combination of immutability and what you view Tawhid to be, or is it strong immutability in and of itself?
Well, I would actually say like immutability and Tawhid, right? So because that's also part of a lot of
what is the combination of strong immutability or immutability, as you say, and Tawhid together? What does Tawhid add to the immutability claim that makes it problematic together, whereas immutability in and of itself without Tawhid is not problematic? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, that's great. So if I see the will of Allah as something which, again, as you even affirmed, is immutable in a type of timeless sense, and it's also, of course, in relation to Allah's hikmah, to his wisdom, right, which is for the good and benefit, especially in relationship to his own attributes. And Allah has one will in the understanding of Tawhid as like one will, one of being, one of essence. Everything is one. Without a contradiction of will or any other attribute, then I would say an immutable will that is, from our lights and our perspective, it being timelessly willed contradictory states for his one attribute of speech, then that seems to either lead to an eternal contradiction in Allah, or at least to a type of like arbitrary nonsense regarding what he chooses to reveal and preserve versus not reveal and preserve. Right?
Can we slow down for a bit, because I'm really trying to laser in and understand what you're saying.
Okay.
What exactly is the conflict or the contradiction? I'm trying to understand this.
Yeah. So, one more time. If Allah's Tawhid, right, the nature of Tawhid means oneness of Allah and also oneness of each of these attributes, right, without division, without contradiction within the attribute, which is part of Tawhid. So he has this like one will, and also that will is immutable, right, with like a type of strong immutability, as you said, not even subject to time or temporal relations.
If it's not, let's say that it's not. Let's say that he has that attribute of will, and it's not a strong immutability.
Okay, well, we can change definitions, right? It doesn't seem like the Wahhabi scholars are so quick to hold to a weak immutability, but if you want to, we can.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just asking for the sake of argument to really understand where exactly the problem is. If somebody holds what you call weak immutability and so-called Tawhid, or there being an attribute of will, what's the problem with that?
Yeah, so Tawhid, as I just said, with the whole immutability, so Allah has this one will that's undivided, non-contradictory, in a type of timeless sense, as you said, immutable. And so the moment that there's creation, right, Allah is timelessly willing towards one attribute of speech, which is also not divided.
By the way, part of the reason why I don't want to cut you off here, but I'm just going to mention this because I really don't care. But part of the reason why I'm distracted is because I literally have Malik messaging me right now, and he's completely losing his mind. So I'm actually just going to say this directly here on the platform. I'm not scared of you, dude. I'm not scared of you at all. He doesn't like that I'm here, that I'm talking to David Squared. He doesn't like that. He's upset about it. I don't care what he thinks about it. He doesn't mean anything to me in that regard. I don't care what he thinks about me coming to this platform or not. If he wants to go back and try to expose my private messages to him, he can have fun and do whatever he wants. I don't care. I'm even happy to send you my address, dude. You have my number right here. I'll send you my address. You're welcome to show up anytime. I doubt you will, but I'm not scared of you. So stop wasting my time. He's also sending me voice notes right now, which obviously I can't listen because I'm talking to you right now. So that's part of the reason why I'm distracted. But yeah, I don't really care. And I've already said this. David knows this. I said this directly to his face several times. I don't appreciate or like at all a lot of his behavior, him ripping up Qurans, all this kind of thing, right? I don't accept it at all. So just because I'm here now talking to David Squared doesn't mean I'm endorsing everything that they're saying or doing. I've made that abundantly clear. Just as I don't really care what Malik has to say either. So I hope he's listening to this. He can put it on TikTok to his 300 followers or fans, and they can have a nice time. And then people like Thaddeus and Chris from Chris Claus, you guys can do your little streams. I really don't care. So anyway, back to the topic.
Yep. Hey, just real quick, since you mentioned me, I just want to say I have a lot more respect for you, Jake, today than I did in the past. You've been really cool this whole stream, and just calling out Malik right there. I want to give you credit. You genuinely do not seem to care what anyone else thinks. You only want to know what is the correct and true position, and I respect that a lot.
Well, I mean, he's literally, look, I mean, I just be very frank with you. He's literally cursing me out on WhatsApp. So but this is the thing, right? Like, I really don't care. Like, who is Malik in the grand scheme of things? Honestly, he's not doing anything for me or against me in that way whatsoever, dude. And like, you can't even dox me. I can't possibly be doxxed because I don't even know my own address in Morocco. Like, so do whatever you want, bro. I really don't care at all. That's how I am with it. And he wants to play these kind of dirty games. If he wants to expose certain private messages or whatever, I don't really care. But I just wanted to say that because I don't want him to continue to be spamming me. I'm going to try to focus on you. So I apologize for that. I'm just distracted with this guy.
I'd be distracted too if somebody was.
What he actually thinks. Like, I think he actually has. He believes that he actually has some type of pull, like that he's going to control me whether or not I go to come to this panel and talk to David Squared or not. Like, dude, I'm here. It's too late. Like, what do you think you're going to threaten me not to come to this platform? Now, I will say that if people do not think that I should ever talk to David Wood, I'm just going to be honest with you. As a Muslim, I think that's a legitimate position to hold, right? And some people do feel like that, and people who I actually respect and are friends with me, and I consider them, senior to me in knowledge and things like that. I would respect their opinion of what they have to say. But Malik, I don't give a shit what you have to say, dude. Like, it doesn't mean anything to me from that point of view. Who are you to try to control me to who I can speak to and who I can't? Now, if other people who I respect have a problem with that, they can come and talk to me. But you don't mean anything to me in that regard. Okay? So, but I'm just trying to be honest too, by the way, David, that I do think that your behavior and the things that you've done and your track record, I think it is a legitimate position for some Muslims to take, to say, we don't want to talk to that guy at all. And we don't think anybody should really be giving him a dignified, session and speaking to him in this way. I really don't think there's a problem with that. But my position is that I'm coming on here in what I think is a controlled environment. And there's, from what I see, there's no blaspheming going on. There's no Quran ripping or desecrating. And I think it's a good opportunity for me to provide the message that I want to on this platform. So that's what I'm doing. And if people don't like it from the Muslim side, that's fine. They can come and speak to me about it. But Malik, I don't care, bro. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'll just I'm not gonna be part of this because you guys are having a good conversation here. I just wanted to point out as everyone knows, I'm happy to go to war when there's war, and happy to escalate and so on, but also happy to have a friendly conversation when that's what's going on. And as far as what's going on here, David S. was on a live stream yesterday, made a series of arguments against Islam, and Jake believes that those arguments are flawed, and came on here to correct what he believes are misrepresentations of the Islamic position. And why a Muslim would not want that, why a Muslim would not want that to happen, and say, no, don't correct this guy who we believe is saying false things about Islam. That is just weird. With that said, I understand what Jake was saying, that I also believe it could be a legitimate position to say, no, this guy's gone too far. This guy's gone too far. So any Muslims who are saying, you know what, David has crossed too many lines, so we're not talking to him, that's totally up. That's totally up to them. Yeah, but I would say the same. I would say basically something similar to what Jake just said. Malik, you don't get to tell anyone what to do. Not me, not anyone else. And if you say you're not gonna, you're talking about, I don't care what you say. Your behavior is so terrible that your thoughts on this issue become irrelevant to me. With that said, other people could say, like what Jake was saying, hey, let's not interact with David, and I wouldn't find that position terribly unreasonable. So with that said, you guys can go ahead and continue.
Yeah, I do just want to say that this is where this is stemming from, or part of the discussion is that there are two primary verses in the Quran which mention that to not sit with people who mock the verses of Allah. I'm paraphrasing, but I think, David, you're familiar with this. And until they change their speech, or until they change their discourse. So if you look at the tafsirs, and I sent this to Malik and he never responded to it, maybe because he doesn't understand the issues associated with this. But if you look at the tafsir, it explains it's conditional upon when the person begins to actually refrain from engaging in that speech, right? So there's room to speak to somebody like, first of all, David S., I'm going to be very honest with you. That's the first time I ever saw you. I don't know who you are really at all. I'm just being honest. So you don't fit that bill to me. But even somebody like David, there could be an opportunity to speak to that person. It's not as if you can never speak to them ever again. Right? That's not my view. That's not my understanding of the verse of the Quran. It's conditional. Now, if David right now, I'm just saying this, if he were to start doing something blasphemous from my perception, or doing something ripping the Quran, or promoting that while I'm here, I would just log off. I would just leave. Right? So that's my view. That's my understanding how this is. I don't believe that somebody like especially David S., someone who's associated with David merely by going on his live stream, that means I can't speak to that person. That's not my view. So, but anyway, I know that some Muslims are going to be offended by that. They don't think that David Wood should be spoken to at all. I think that's an honest, fair position, to be very frank with you. But when it comes to Malik, I don't really care what your position is. I mean, you have no status when it comes to the Dawah community. What are you offering, right? What are you offering in terms of intellectually, or anything community based? What are you actually offering to the table? So that's where I am with it. But yeah, that I just want to put this sort of backdrop to say that it's not coming out of nowhere why certain Muslims feel that way, because they think there's a Quranic injunction that when somebody is doing these kind of things, we're not able to sit around them, because then basically we become one of them, because it's like, oh, we're just sitting there while they're doing it as if we don't have any problem with it. And that's when it becomes problematic. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with it. But we can kind of get back to it, David S.
Yeah. I appreciate that. So yeah, you were asking about
really David Segarra?
Claro que no, not a chance. No.
Okay.
No.
Right.
No.
So anyway, but I didn't want to keep calling you Puerto Rican David, so I'm going to call you David S. But go ahead.
Yeah,
I forgot where you left off.
No, it was definitions. The definitions on immutability and tawhid. And so, what I was
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So, if tawhid is like oneness of all his attributes, including oneness of will, and also if he is like this will is truly immutable, such that he's just only ever doing the kind of things. So that's the weak immutability. He's only ever doing the kind of things he's doing. Well, then I think a Muslim should say that he is eternally either willing his speech, if you want to say that, or eternally speaking, so that he's always doing that kind of thing that he was doing prior to creation, which was speech. Therefore, the act of revelation doesn't become problematic. So this, I can't remember which dilemma that would be able to get rid of, but I know one of the dilemmas was that movement in which you claimed that he wasn't always speaking. He just had the ability to speak. So you'd be able to get rid of that dilemma pretty easily if you change to a weak immutability. And I know it's kind of weird for the audience. Why am I telling him how to beat my dilemma? Well, that's what you do in philosophy. You actually have to give people like definitions to show them how they would destroy an argument. So my argument would be crushed if you change to a weak form of immutability to say he's always doing the kind of things he's doing, and he has always been speaking. So when he makes a creation, which is its own question, but when he does make a creation, he's always been the kind of being that speaks. So revelation is, a thing that might flow from that. Of course, people would then say, well, no, he doesn't have like relational speech. He just has the act of speech. So would he ever make anything to speak with at all, like a universe or rational agents? And I would argue no. But I do think you could break one of my dilemmas if you just hold to like a weak immutability in which he's always doing the kind of things, which is speaking, not just the ability to speak. Does that make sense? Is that like, does that fall a bit more?
When you say the weak immutability view that he's always doing certain kind of things, what would it mean for him to always be speaking? What would that mean?
Well, I mean, so in the same way, and that's actually a great question. And by the way, what Jake's doing right now is what everybody should be doing with like any theological, philosophical discussion. Ask for definitions. That's what I always tell people when I train them in college or elsewhere. I always say first step is definitions. So we would say that it's like the same mystery of what does it mean for Allah to always be powerful? Like, what does it mean to just have this eternal attribute of ability, of power, right? Or what does it mean for Allah to eternally be all-knowing? That's just like an eternal attribute, right? That's just an eternal attribute of God to have all-knowingness. And so he's just like actively knowing all things, right? He's actively all-powerful. So he's just actively...
Speaking as an action?
If you want to say that he is, which actually, yeah, I would say you would have to, so that he's always been doing the eternal kind of thing, which is speech, right? So if you hold that it's like an eternal action that he's doing, which flows from his attribute of speech, then that would be an easier way to break one of those dilemmas for sure.
Can you just repeat that again? Sorry.
No, yeah, that's right. That's right. Don't worry. No, that is okay. This is fine.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. All right. 2, 3, 4. Okay. So tawhid, oneness of will, immutability, right? So this weak immutability. So he's always doing this kind of thing. So Allah is eternally willing, his own speaking, right? So from his attribute of speech, he's eternally willing his own speaking, such that when he makes a creation, then it's not a serious issue for him to like have these revelations that appear to mankind, because now he's always been the kind of being that speaks. So now he has his speech manifest. Now, of course, the issue that David and I were arguing is that his speech seems to be, or his will towards his one will towards his manifestation of speech, towards his speaking, seems to be contradictory, right? Especially with like this kind of timeless, immutable will, where he is timelessly willing the preservation and corruption of his own manifestations of speech. And that seems like a contradiction that's essential to his will, right? To essentially, eternally will opposite states, or as people would say, a contradiction. Allah eternally wills towards his one attribute of speech, preservation, and Allah eternally wills towards his one attribute of speech, corruption. So if Allah is willing A and non-A for the same attribute at the same time, eternally, then that is by definition a contradiction.
Yeah, but then in that case, what I'm trying to point out is what you're presenting, as far as I'm concerned, is nothing unique to Islamic theology, right? Because I could make the same point. Well, okay, somebody can have a Christian view of God, maybe even be Trinitarian, and hold that God is immutable and he has these two actions at the same time that appear contradictory, right? And it doesn't even have to be about preserving his word. It could be anything related to God's plan that could, if you're saying, like, for example, at the same time, he's eternally willing for David to exist and also not exist at the same time. Well, okay, that's contradictory because David can't be alive and dead at the same time, right? But because the action is eternal and that's within his will and he's immutable, then now it's a problem for that view of God as well. So what I'm trying to say is, first of all, I don't even think it's a problem. I can explain why. But even if it is a problem, it doesn't seem to be a unique problem to Islam. Like, there's nothing about the Islamic conception of God that is unique in this respect that causes a specific problem. That's what I just not seeing that.
No, that's great. So I actually really appreciate that. And I think that I do mention that in the book as like a caveat in case somebody were to say that. So in this case, right, what the example you gave was, Allah's will, or just some model of God, right? His will towards something in creation. Mine was towards his own attributes, like towards himself. So there is like an ontological distinction between my existence and Allah's necessary attributes. So if Allah is eternally willing about his own attributes, which have eternally existed, if he's eternally willing towards his own attributes, opposite states, preservation and corruption, then that would be a much larger issue, right? But to be fair to you, right, because I think it's important to be charitable in that, there are Christians I critique if I think that they're offering something that leads to like a necessary modal collapse. So if your response was only to say, well, that's not unique to the Islamic tradition, contradictions can happen anywhere, I would say yes, but it's still an issue no matter what, right? A contradiction is a contradiction, if it actually is a contradiction. That being said, you did say, again, to be fair to you, you did say that you don't think it's an issue for Allah to be eternally willing towards himself, towards his own nature, his own attribute of speech, timelessly willing.
Well, I do think that's a problem. I mean, we kind of have been dancing around here, but I think I should just cut the chase and tell you the same thing I told David Wood, which is that I don't believe in a. Oh, I think you're getting called.
I'm sorry. One second. All right. This is. I feel so bad about this. I'll be back in like 2 minutes. I hear something I have to address real quick. I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'll be real quick.
Sure. All right. So in the meantime, we can talk about in anticipation of Malik's big expose. Okay.
Been there.
I'm trying to think of what he thinks that he's going to expose. So he's called me a munafiq, which means hypocrite. So that's you could argue that's essentially declaring me a disbeliever. What else did he say here?
Sorry about that.
Some
we are
words
all
that on here, but let's see. What else? Anything else? He says it's going to be juicy. It's going to be a juicy exposing.
Oh, what did I just walk into? What happened about juice?
Yeah, no. I figured, hey, man, we don't want to have dead air time here, but yeah, and he keeps calling me fat as if I don't know that I'm fat. Like, I know I'm overweight. It's almost like the Sam Shamoon thing where, and it's weird, because I don't think he's really that fat, but it's almost like the Sam Shamoon thing where he's so embarrassed that he's so fat and overweight that he can't even go outside to go get to church and get communion, that he thinks that everyone else who's fat is like so disturbed by it that when he calls them that, they're not going to leave their house too. So I think maybe that's like what Malik has going on. I don't know, but it doesn't really bother.
No, with Malik, you can go back anytime someone calls him out for anything, like in the chat or something like that. If he knows them, he instantly goes for personal attack. Like if it's a woman, he'll attack her for being old or unmarried or something like that. He's just he likes to go with the personal attacks and attacks on parents. In other words, things that really have nothing to do with any arguments or discussions that are going on.
Yeah. Anyway, so back to it. I was trying to say I want to cut to the chase and basically tell you that I don't believe, at least in the concept of God that you're talking about, of being an immutable, utterly timeless, frozen picture type of conception of God. I don't believe in that at all. This is not the so-called Wahhabi view. In fact, it's diametrically opposed to my view and the Wahhabi view. I actually, if I can show you this, just want to show you so that you don't think I'm like making this up on the spot.
Sure.
I just want to show you an article that I wrote related to this. It's on my academia page. And since you mentioned R.T. Mullins, it was actually graded by him in my master's program. Let me share this here. Okay, so I have a bunch of different articles related to this, but one of them is called "The God of Aristotle is not the God of Abraham."
Jake, did you want this on the screen or not?
Yeah, can you see it or no?
Yeah, I see it. Here you go.
Okay, yeah. So I just want to show you this so you see. Like I wrote this in 2024, right? So this is almost like 2 years ago, and it's called "The God of Aristotle is not the God of Abraham," and what I argue here is, just looking at the abstract, I say there's been extensive debate in the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions concerning the relationship between the God of Aristotle and the God of Abraham. Are they the same God? This paper seeks to address this question from an Islamic perspective. After providing the necessary details for the theology of Aristotle, the focus will turn towards detailing the legendary Sunni scholar of Hadith, Muhammad al-Bukhari, his understanding of divine action. The author, meaning me, will support the interpretation being argued for by utilizing the interpretation of al-Bukhari's view on divine action from Ash'aris and Maturidis. Basically, I'm showing that I'm not just getting this from Wahhabi sources. I'm showing the interpretation of those who are opposed to the view, but admitting that Bukhari held this view. Commentary from Muhammad Anwar Shah al-Kashmiri will serve to vindicate the who's a Maturidi scholar, by the way, will serve to vindicate the controversial theologian Ibn Taymiyyah, demonstrating his compatibility with the theology of al-Bukhari and Ahl al-Hadith, the people of Hadith, or the scholars of Hadith. A parallel will be drawn between the Mutakallimun, or the practitioners of Kalam, and Aristotle's notion of divine immutability and its relation to divine perfection, followed by a brief rejoinder. Finally, a response will be provided to another common objection to the theology of al-Bukhari and Ibn Taymiyyah based on the well-known Quranic reference, Laysa kamithlihi shay, there is no God, there's nothing like unto him. As understood by al-Bukhari, the Quran portrays God, Allah, as a dynamic creator, capable of acting in succession. On the other hand, the God of Aristotle is a static, simple God, incapable of thinking anything except himself. Despite protestations by some of the Islamic philosophers and Mutakallimun, practitioners of Kalam, the God of Aristotle is not the God of Abraham. So anyway, basically in this entire article, what I'm trying to argue from an Islamic paradigm, from the Quran, a straightforward reading of it, and from the, I focus on al-Bukhari because he's pretty much accepted by all Sunnis, that as a legitimate scholar, that he held the same view, and Ibn Taymiyyah, who's a later scholar who gets a lot of attacks from the other theological camps, is just holding the same view as him. So I'm arguing that the God of Aristotle is not the God of Abraham, in the sense that the God of Aristotle is a static, immutable, simple God that doesn't really have any real distinct attributes or actions, doesn't act in succession or anything like that. And the God of the Quran does, I think also the biblical God, from my point of view, And I tried to represent that from early scholarship like Imam al-Bukhari. So I'm saying that to say I'm not coming up with this like unique response just to get out of this David's dilemma.
Sure.
This has always been my view. In fact, R.T. Mullins, who keeps getting shouted out, we
He's
have
great.
to start asking to get paid by him at this point. From he should be paying us for shouting him out on here. No, but he's a good friend of mine. He was one of the teachers in my master's program, and in his second book on God and time, he actually uses me in a footnote related to the Islamic position on God's relationship to time. So I say all of that to say this is not a new position that I'm adopting in light of this problem. I was saying to David earlier, I think even the idea of eternal action in the sense of actions or causal relations not being temporal and having a before and after, I think is completely nonsense. So I don't hold that view. I don't hold the view of strong divine immutability or simplicity. I think God has real distinct attributes, including distinct actions, and his actions, all of them, have a beginning in time because any action is necessarily temporal and has a before and after relation. So that's my view, and this is the so-called Wahhabi view. This is the Athari Salafi Hadith view, and I think I can demonstrate this. Oh, now I'm getting another call. So yeah, things are really gonna pop off here. But so anyway, this is my view, and I think on the one hand you misrepresented the Wahhabi view, and on the other hand, I don't really see how the argument is really landing.
Yeah, no, that's great. So that's excellent. Now, I totally understand that the Wahhabi view is very different from the rest of like these other Islamic views, which do hold to some sort of Aristotelian inspired philosophical set of presuppositions. So I totally get that. I think the issue is the language I see in the different Wahhabi scholars that I showed on the presentation, and also the kind of language about even as you said in the beginning of our conversation,
Have your
saying that.
presentation? Could you pull it up and maybe give an example? Because legitimately, there is no anyone who is claiming to be a Wahhabi who doesn't believe that God acts in succession is not a Wahhabi by definition. They can't be. They're in my view, they are heretics.
Well, no, so it wasn't that. It was the fact that there's some of them are saying he acts in succession while also having a will, like the causal will that is immutable, and by extension of an immutable will, therefore timeless, right? So it's confusing for me
I'm
to
telling you,
see.
brother, I'm telling you, there is no so-called Wahhabi scholar who believes that God's will is immutable such that it's not subject to succession or time in that way.
Okay.
There's none. And if they are, they are what Malik said are munafiqs. They're hypocrites. They're not actual Wahhabis.
So it's just confusing then, because at the beginning of our conversation, when you spoke of like an immutable will, and then said like lacking change and time is a set of sequence of changes, and therefore the will by extension would be like timeless, is what we said at the beginning. It's confusing to go from like the notion of a timeless will that's immutable without change, not just
I
by
never
time.
was saying that was my view, though, brother. I never said that was my view. What I was saying
when
to
you
you,
gave the definitions, I just assumed it was.
What's that?
Well, you gave those definitions, so that's why I said, okay, well, if that's your definition.
Those are. Look. My theory of language is that the meaning of a sentence or a word is partially based upon the intention of the speaker, right? So if David uses a word in a particular way, to answer his question, I have to ask him, especially if it's an ambiguous term, I have to ask him what he means by the word, and then I'm going to answer it based upon what he's looking for, right? So that's what I was trying to do with you. As long as when we're talking about the subject, we understand what each other's saying based upon common definitions, that's fine for me. But I was never representing my view as, God being strongly immutable or timeless in that way. In fact, I mean, David Wood could attest to that. I was denying that the entire time before you got on. So that's certainly not my view.
Okay. All right. So it was just confusing for me. That's all. When you defined it that way, I assumed that
Yeah,
your
I was
definition
defining it that way, but I never affirmed it for myself or the so-called Wahhabi view. In fact, I'm
Okay.
saying it's exact opposite of the Wahhabi view, and that's why I was so perplexed by the presentation, and especially when you bring up people like Ibn Taymiyyah. In fact, there's actually a pretty good, because I'm assuming that you don't read Arabic. I'm just
No.
asking for. Okay, so there's a pretty good book that's related to this on Ibn Taymiyyah. I think it's called Ibn Taymiyyah on Causality, and it's a couple 100-page book that's translated into English based upon his primary source works. And anyway, all throughout it, you see like Ibn Taymiyyah is actually defending that view, and he's criticizing the view of the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. He considers them to be, he calls them Jahmis, or the Jahmiyyah, which were actually an earlier sect who were considered a deviant sect. And it's kind of a pejorative term. And the whole text is based upon this notion of saying, no, God actually does really act in succession. The entire framework of the Quran and the way that it tells stories is based upon that. For example, it says that Allah created the jinn before he created mankind. Well, did he actually really do that? Did he actually really create the jinn and then have another distinct act of creating Adam and mankind? Well, that's the apparent meaning of the text. That's the way that we read it. So we don't take our position is we don't take these outside sort of what I would call pseudo-rational principles or claimed philosophical principles that are not based upon Scripture and actually are diametrically opposed to the apparent meaning of Scripture, and then interpret it based upon that. We don't do that. So that's our position fundamentally when it comes to all of God's attributes and his actions. So you're not going to see anywhere where Ibn Taymiyyah is defending this strong immutability or strong simplicity view or anything like that. It just doesn't exist, and it doesn't exist amongst any modern, or if you want to say classical, even though Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab is not really a classical scholar, any so-called Wahhabis, even though I don't really prefer that term. So it was just shocking to me. I'm being very honest. It was shocking to me all that because it's just the exact opposite of what we believe.
No. So again, as I was going through the, different Wahhabi claims, it just seemed confusing when I also saw the claims about the nature of Allah's will, right? So I understand what Wahhabis are claiming in these general senses, but then other claims they were saying seem to go against these other beliefs, right? It seemed like they were
presentation, brother. Is there a possibility to do that? Can you bring it up and show me like a quote?
I'll show you a part that was kind of confusing for me, and maybe we can go through it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I don't have all this stuff memorized, but I'd be happy to look at it later. But I specifically want to see who is the scholar and who is the one that's confusing you on this point.
You want me to pull that up, David?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, okay. Like it's just these different aspects, right? So I'd have to ask, would you, and do you think Wahhabi scholars would hold to this idea of like a universal determined will of Allah just to start, so we can figure out if we're on the same page or not?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, so you do believe that Allah like has this will of all of these events that have to occur, like written and decreed by necessity.
Say the last part again. That it's what by necessity.
So kind of like what it says here. I wonder if my dots. There it is. So this relates to everything that Allah wills, his actions, and what he brings into existence, what he loves and what he's not pleased with. It is bound to occur as he has written and decreed. Such as the birth of one person, death of another, etc., etc. So like all of this is to say it's bound to occur. This will, this universal determined will of Allah must happen.
So anything that he intends to happen and anything that he wills to happen will take place. It can't fail.
Okay. And so like his will, this universal will just does not change, right?
Doesn't change in the sense of his intent and his plan and what he's going to will. Yes, it doesn't change. But in the sense of individual actions that are taken by God himself to accomplish that will, then there are different actions that he has throughout time.
Sure, but they're all like still part of this over-encompassing universal will that is bound to occur. Like he has to do
but
these
when you
things
say
that are in his
universal
will.
will, it's more in the idea of what he's determined or what his plan is or what his intent is. But there's not like an eternal act.
Okay, so this will isn't the same as like what it would have been prior to creation or something.
Hold on a second. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Oh yeah, that's fine. So I asked this will that Allah has. So you're saying that it's not eternal, right? So this isn't the same will that he had like prior to creation.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying his intent, his plan, his divine decree, his will in the sense of his plan and his divine decree is eternal, right? But the actual actions that he takes in time to accomplish that divine decree or plan, those all unfold in time, and he really does different things at different times.
Okay, all in accordance with this like eternal will. It's all in accordance with like this eternal
it's
intent.
like, think about it in a simple way, right? Like I could have a plan to go to the store, but then I actually get up and go in my car and drive to the store, right? So you can have a plan in a sort of or general sense, and then you take actions to actually accomplish that plan.
Okay, so in that case then, right, because it just wanted to make sure all the wording is clear and all that. So he does have like this eternal plan. So the will is just Allah's planning. That's all the attribute of will is. It's not like causally relevance. It doesn't cause anything to happen. It's not related to his power or making stuff happen. It's just kind of like an attribute of having a plan.
Okay, if you read here, right, so it says, what is meant by the will of Allah that is all encompassing over all events and occurrences that takes place. This relates to everything that Allah wills, his actions, and what he brings into existence. This includes what he loves and what he is not pleased with, such as disbelief or disobedience. And then he says, however, and whatever he wills is according to his perfect wisdom, his complete knowledge of the consequences, and his absolute awareness and ability of over all things. So the irada, basically the will, right, can include that which Allah loves and is pleased with, or that which he does not love and is not pleased with. However, it is bound to occur as he has written and decreed, such as the birth of one person and the death of another, the sickness of one and the health of another, the iman, meaning the belief, and the kufr or disbelief of another, and so on. So, and it says, Imam Ibn Baz explained that the universal determined will is that which is already known by Allah and recorded in the preserved tablet, and the intent is that which has been decreed already, that it will indeed occur. So it's exactly what I'm explaining. It's an eternal intent in the sense of God knows everything that he's going to will and that he intends to occur, that he determines to occur. But then in the outcome, or the outfolding of his plan, he actually wills certain things to take place in order for that plan to be accomplished.
Okay. So all right, so it is this intent, which is in accordance with what's known by him. So like his knowledge and even perhaps his hikmah, like his, what's known. And so all of it's just already determined.
Yeah, everything we believe everything that he does or he wills to occur is based upon his divine hikmah or wisdom.
Okay. All right. So Allah is like, eternally willed that at certain points in time he would kind of interact with his creation through like revelation or whatever else it might be. So Allah has like eternally seen it as a good thing to be interactive. He's seen it as a good thing to be like relational and to be relating to his creation in these like interactive and beneficial ways, I'm guessing, right? Like he has this type of interactive beneficial disposition.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to figure out like, because now it feels kind of abstract, right? He's got like this intense that's been decreed that will come to pass in accordance with what's known by him and also apparently preserved on those heavenly tablets. And so if it's all just determined and it's from this, as you said, like an eternal will, this eternal intent about things he's going to do, then does that mean like all the parts he intends to do where he interacts, right? Kind of like your plan to go to the store, you got to drive a car and walk and all that. So all these moments where he's like, all right, I eternally will that at this point in time, I'm going to, give this speech to creation, or I'm going to allow them to have this revelation sent down to them. Is that like because he sees interaction with his creation as a good thing? He sees this like relational pursuit as a good thing?
Everything that he's doing, he sees as the most wise thing to do.
Like in like the most good thing to do?
Yeah, if you want to sort of equate the two, sure.
Okay. All right, because now that's also like back to, that just kind of leads to some confusions I have about why Allah would eternally value relationality, interactivity with other persons is a good thing if he doesn't have that like eternal experience of interacting or relationality within himself, right? It's almost like he's making creation to do this thing that he's, as you just said, right? He sees these as good things that should be done. It's a good thing to interact. It's a good thing to relate to other persons and to reveal oneself to them. It's a good thing to be known. But
yeah,
would a lot see those as like good things to be known, to be interactive, if he's not like eternally experiencing that reality as an axiological truth?
I don't even see, for me, I don't even know what it means to eternally experience something in the way that you're saying it. Because to me,
okay, all right, that's fair.
Because to me, necessarily all action is temporal. So there's going to be a before and after to anything that's taking place in that way, including so-called experiences. So I'm not really sure I understand that. Secondly, I'm not sure why it would need to be the case that Allah or God needs to actually eternally, in the way that you said, experience something in order to value it. I don't see how that follows at all. He could value something.
Yeah.
You could value something without. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. David S., do you still want this on the screen or?
Oh, we'll take it off for a second, then we'll go to the other slide.
I'm just looking at it. Yeah, I can't see anybody.
Yeah, I just realized that too. Yeah, we'll go to other slides too. Now that we're talking, I guess we can just
So I'm saying I just don't see why God would need to eternally experience something in order to value it. I mean, let me ask it this way, because do you think that God values forgiveness?
I think that God values so again, that's like, remember how I talked about, this kind of weaker form of immutability? There's like kinds of things that God values, right? Like these categories of action, which would also go for like Allah with weak immutability. I would say like there's these kind of things that God can see as like generally good categories based off things he's already doing, right? So I would say that God would see a loving set of actions or relationality between persons, like persons in love, as a good thing. So when he makes the creation, these like second order goods are now possible. But those are only things that God sees as beneficial for humans because there's some sense of pre-existence within the fact that, the Trinitarian God says, hey, I eternally see a right set of relationality between persons as a good thing. I see love as a good thing between persons. And so in a creation, that would just manifest as like forgiveness, right? Being like an extension. And so, but also back to your point, and I think it's an important point that you brought up, that you asked about. Why would God have to, like eternally experience something for him to see it as valuable or good? It's not so much like, well, okay, some would actually argue he does have to for the sake of like logic in terms of like axiological necessity. Why would he see something as axiologically meaningful if he doesn't, see it in himself? Because Allah sees himself as the most perfect thing. So obviously he would see those aspects of himself as things to be willed. But let's say it's not even like logically necessary, even though some people would argue that. The God model that explains things best is the one who actually has a reason to see those things as like meaningful because he sees it within himself. So I would just say that it's strangely mysterious for Allah to eternally will or eternally desire to interact with other persons and to be related to other persons and to reveal himself, make himself known to other persons, if there's no other persons with which he's had that experience prior to creation. There's less mystery for the Trinitarian model of God, right? With the Trinitarian model of God, I'd say, oh, well, God eternally sees relationality of persons, right? These like persons in relationship. He sees it as a good thing. So of course he just would, that God makes more sense as the kind of God who would interact with his creation and see it as a good thing. And so my model of God would explain things with less mystery, while it would seem like Allah, who, as you said, thinks it's a good thing to interact, explains that with more mystery, less explanation.
Yeah, see, I struggle to understand that. In fact, there's a discussion about this. I think Peter Van Inwagen, who's a Christian philosopher, he actually says that it's more mysterious why a Trinitarian God would create, considering the fact that he already supposedly has that perfect relationality eternally. It seems that he actually has less reason to create than a Unitarian God. So I think it's kind of subjective about how you look at these things. That's going to determine, well, do you think it makes more sense? I mean, if the Trinity is perfect, and God supposedly perfectly loves himself and has this perfect loving relationship amongst the three persons, then to me, it seems less of a reason why he would want to, or have to, I don't want to say have to, but want to create anything at all. It seems to me more mysterious why God would actually want to create, given the fact that he already has this perfect loving relationship. He's not, quote unquote, sort of in need or lacking in any of that. I can actually use your argument in the reverse and say, well, no, it actually seems to me more reasonable that Allah would want to create, because he would want to have that relationship with things in creation.
So he would be like kind of dependent on his creation for him to like feel this.
See, that's how you would want to word it. I wouldn't word it that way.
Well, here, maybe I can say in a less aggressive way. I don't mean to. I'm sorry. I don't mean to say it in like an aggressive way. I'll say it differently. If it's true, right? Like you just said, it makes more sense for Allah to do this so that he can experience, or so that he can have these relationships.
Right? You could argue it in that way. I could see it from that point of view.
Yeah. So it's just, since you worded that way, I'm like, well, okay, yeah, right. But then that would seem to make a type of like dependence on creation, right? Like Allah has this type of perfection that he's lacking. For the Trinitarian side of things, it actually makes sense, right? So, for instance, let's say I, just as you use the car example, going to the store, let's say that I see, I'm in a family, and so I was raised in a family, right? So as a result, of course, this isn't a one-for-one analogy, but just stick with me. Since I was raised in a family, I just see family and large amounts of interaction as just a good thing. And so when I'm thinking about what kind of family I would want in the future, I would actually, because of my experiences, be drawn towards, especially if it's a healthy family, it's a wonderful, healthy family, then I would be drawn towards.
What's if a perfect family? Again? What if it's a perfect family? Would you want to have another child?
Well, I mean, yeah, because I'm saying, when I say family, I'm sorry, I should qualify this. I had an image in my mind. I'm saying like a mom and a dad and brothers, right? When I say a family, like when I'm being raised. So if I'm a kid raised in a family, right, like this very loving, perfect, healthy family, and I see family as a good thing, I see it as great to be in relationship with people, then when I grow up, I would actually be far more likely to actually want to, have the same thing that I experienced, right? And to even let other people experience that same kind of relationship with me, my children. And so that's the example I'm giving there, right? So I would say that it's strange to say that Allah is like kind of, he makes a creation so that he can experience interaction, so that he can experience all this.
That's what's happening. I don't think it's happening. What I'm saying to you is, I think you are privileging certain attributes of God over and against other ones, and I see that it's being done in an inconsistent fashion. For example, I brought up the issue of mercy and forgiveness earlier. Within the Trinity itself, do you believe that God is eternally forgiving or merciful?
No, I think God is eternally loving, and then forgiveness and mercy are these like manifestations of that in creation. But I would say that he's eternally loving, and that's like the attribute that sources those other attributes in creation.
But he doesn't give acts of mercy or forgiveness eternally.
No, he's like eternally loving, right? And so in creation, right, the manifestation of love would be mercy or forgiveness in accordance with his act of justice, right? Giving to one their due.
And do you think the Father loves himself?
Yeah, I think the Father loves the Son, the Father and the Son love the Holy Spirit loves the Father and the Son. I think there's kind of this perichoresis, eternal dance of love.
But do they love themselves too?
I would assume that they would love their personal existence, sure. I guess I've never really heard a theologians take much time, but yeah, I would say that the persons of God probably value and love themselves.
Okay, so I think it all comes down to the assumption is that the possession of an attribute, in order to possess an attribute, you necessarily must express the attribute, right? So it seems to me that you're saying that God cannot be possess the attribute or possess the disposition to be relational or to want to be relational unless he necessarily expresses this aspect of it.
I must have said that incorrectly. I didn't say necessarily. I said it results in less mystery, right? So I was going with like an inference to the best explanation, not one of necessity. So not necessity, not like necessary expression. I'm saying it just seems more mysterious to say that Allah, who is perfect, because both of us are assuming like our model of God is perfect, right? I think that's a fair assumption to say, yeah. So it makes more sense in my lights that a God who is perfect in a Unitarian sense would not have any type of axiological leaning or foundation or desire to be in relational states with something else, i.e. a creation.
That's perplexing. Why would that be? Why would a Unitarian God not desire to be in a relation with somebody else? In other words, it seems to me that you're saying the reason is because he's not eternally in a relation with someone else. Therefore, because he's not eternally in a relation with somebody else, he wouldn't have the desire to be in a relation with somebody else. And I just don't see how that follows at all.
Well, yeah, so that's a great question. So again, if we both affirm that we have like models of God that are perfect, then would you agree that Allah sees everything about himself as perfect?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. In the same way that you asked me if like the Father loved himself or something. So Allah sees everything about himself as perfect, right? And therefore he would will things in accordance with all these perfections he sees in himself, correct? He wouldn't like will in opposition to it, right? Yeah. So if he's willing in accordance with all these perfections he sees in himself, and one of those perfections or one of the ways he sees himself is alone by himself, then he would continue to will that kind of state. The Trinitarian God, on the other hand, right, just going off your like the things you're confirming.
No, I'm saying that he sees relating to others at a specific moment in time as a perfection.
Well, I mean, but there's not a creation yet, right? Like Allah doesn't have to create. I think you would affirm. Well, okay, I know that's actually contested. Would you say that creation was a necessity in Allah's case?
It depends. It really depends what you mean by this. If you
want to start, I even affirm that. I know it's contested.
If you want to start going down like modal language and talking about these different categories of possibility and necessity and things like that,
maybe I can change that. I can make that a bit more.
What I'm trying to say to you is, Allah eternally within Himself knew that it was perfect to relate to creatures and to even specific creatures at a particular moment in time. So I believe that God's perfections are also time indexed. For example, I believe that whether I like it or not, God created David Wood. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people don't like it, but you know, it is what it is. So, but I believe that all of God's actions are perfectly wise, such that at the moment in which David Wood was created in his mother's womb, that was the perfect moment for God to create him, and it would be less perfect before or after. That's my position. So I believe that God's actions, including his actions to relate to created beings or even specific created beings at specific times, are time indexed.
Sure, and I think that's a wonderful response, because that helps me to understand you a bit better. So while I hear that that's what must be the case, right? Because we'll just keep on using David as an example, because why not? I think that's a good example. So it just so happens to be the case that David's existence is this thing willed by Allah. Like all these relational things are a thing that Allah willed. Revelation, like expressing himself through speech and revelation, even natural revelation. The question is, I get that, right? Because that has to be the case, because things happened and he wills all things. Therefore, you have to say, if you're being a consistent Muslim, that it's all in accordance with his perfect wisdom, even if it's time indexed. I'm going like a step even further back, though. I'm saying, okay, like what's the grounding? What's the grounding for him seeing being related to other entities or beings or persons? What's the grounding for him seeing that is a good thing? That's my actual question.
I don't really know how to get deeper than that, other than God sees it as something that's good. I think that your answer, if I ask you the same question, you're going to say, well, the only difference that I can see is that, well, God was relating to another divine person eternally. But, well, just because he was doing it eternally, why does that necessitate or make it more probable, or
great question,
language that you want to make? Why does that make it more conceptually easier to understand how that itself is a perfection? That's why I'm saying what your argument seems to assume is that God, all of God's perfections and what he deems to be perfect, including his actions, all must take place eternally. And I just don't see why that's the case.
Yeah. So we'll then go back to that, because right, in the same way that you said Allah wills, or Allah is perfect, Allah sees himself as perfect, he wills all things that are in accordance with his perfections, and one of those perfections is Tawheed, oneness, aloneness. So he would will that. So if you apply that now to the Trinity, right? So I would say
I don't think God wills that. I don't think being one person, and I don't even think this is your position, I don't think being one person or three persons is something that God wills, right? He doesn't like choose and say,
when I said
I don't want to be one person or three persons, right?
That's not what I'm saying. I said things that are like in accordance with those set of perfections that he sees, right? So like relationality. So when I'm going to the Trinity, right,
just because he's eternally alone, let's say,
just give me a chance here.
Okay, go ahead.
Because in the same way that you explain like the time index and how he looks to the future to see the kind of perfections that he sees as good and desirable and all that. I'm saying that the God of Christianity, the triune God, sees relationality, being related to other, entities, being in this type of set of relationships, would be a better grounding for then saying, okay, why would God? Because both of us are saying that God wills or sees it as a good thing to have these future relationships, right? He sees relationships as a good thing in the future.
Yeah.
So all I ask for is the grounding for that, right?
Yeah. What's the grounding in the Trinitarian God? That's what I'm trying to say.
The grounding would be that God eternally experiences and eternally, or at least in an everlasting sense, sees. Well, no, but that's the difference, right? Is that I'm saying that there's a grounding.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I already anticipated that. The only difference in the two models is you're saying God in the Trinitarian sense is eternally experiencing fellowship or relationship or however way you want to phrase it.
And sees it as perfect.
What's that?
And as a result, sees it as perfect, right?
Yeah. So here's what I'm saying. As a result of experiencing that eternally, he sees it as perfect. And then in virtue of that, he wants to have a relationship with creatures. So what I'm saying is the key assumption in the argument is that in order for God to see something as perfect, he must be experiencing it eternally. If he doesn't experience it eternally, then there's not a good ground for him to see something in the future as a perfection or as something that is perfect. And I just don't see how that follows. It doesn't, there's no inference between the two. It's just a claim.
No. So again, like I was saying, right? If he sees this as a good state of being, then I actually have some grounding. The one that you said, he doesn't have a grounding other than the future. So Allah's desire or will for these things that he sees as good, like relationship with creatures, his grounding for that is his wisdom of creatures in the future, which means that Allah wills to have relationship with creatures in the future because he wills for creatures to exist in the future for him to have a relationship with, right?
No. He will. He has that intent eternally because he sees it as a good in and of itself at a particular moment in time.
Yeah, exactly. In that particular moment of time is the future, right? So that's exactly
why
what
is
I
that
just
problematic?
said.
You're not
Well,
really
no. So you described it as if I said it differently than you did, but you said the exact same thing I just described, right? That's exactly what I said. Allah is dependent on the future existence of creatures to explain why he, views relationship with creatures eternally as a good thing.
No, doesn't follow.
Okay.
It taking place at a future moment in time is precisely because he eternally views it as a good. He views it as a good, and in virtue of him viewing it as a good, he wills it to take place.
He wills it. That sounds like kind of a circle, though, right?
What's that?
I mean, doesn't that sound like a circle? He wills it to take place, and because he sees it as a good thing, and he sees it as a good thing in virtue of that, he wills it to take place. That sounds like a circle.
It's like in the case of, we can do the same thing with the Trinity. Well, why is the Father eternally have let's say a positive relationship with the Son? Why is he eternally willing to have that relationship with the Son?
Yeah, because they share the same divine nature, right? And God always has a perfect experience with his own divine nature. So I actually do have an answer for that, but you still haven't answered my question. Like, I understand.
No, you haven't, my brother. You're not understanding my point. Your entire objection is prefaced on the claim that in order for something to be perfect, even at some point in the future, it must be premised upon an experience of that thing eternally. And I'm saying,
an all-knowing being.
There's just no argument for that. It's just a claim.
Again, in the same way that I asked you, does Allah see all of those attributes or all those aspects of himself as perfect? And does he will things in accordance with those attributes? You said yes. I'm saying the God of Christianity also sees all these aspects, attributes, and states of himself as perfect, and therefore wills in accordance with those states. We both are in agreement on that because we both already said that. The difference is...
the only difference is you're saying the God of Christianity experiences that eternally, and the God of Islam does not. That's the only difference.
Exactly. And so that exact fact, that brute fact of experience, is the grounding for why it makes sense for the Christian.
And that's why I'm challenging that. Why does God need to experience that eternally in order for it to be a grounding of why he's going to do something in the future? There's plenty
he has a reason.
There's plenty of things that God does in the future that is not based upon some prior experience that he has.
But it would actually be able to explain the fact of creation because it gives God a reason, right? Like it gives less
of a reason because God is already in this perfect loving relationship. That's why Peter Van Inwagen says it's actually more mysterious why there is a creation on the Trinitarian view, because he's already in a perfect loving relationship, there's less of a reason, there's less of a justification for why he would want to create these creatures. He's already in this perfect loving relation.
Oh yeah, One quick question, Jake. Do you know? And if you don't, you can always let me know later if you don't recall. But do you recall where Peter Van Inwagen said that? Because it doesn't sound like something Peter Van Inwagen would say to me.
I would have to. I mean, I don't have it right in front of me. I'd have to bring it up.
Okay, yeah. If you can just send that to me when you
yeah,
can.
Sure.
I'd be interested in checking that out. All right.
Yeah. Sure.
Sorry about that.
And I would just disagree with Peter, because I've seen other people.
I'm not using him as a hujjah. I'm not using him as a proof, right?
Sure.
I'm just trying to say that there's a level of subjectivity here in the sort of reasoning that's going on. For example, I could say, I mean, David probably could resonate with this as a psychopath. Do you think that there's a perfect state of being in which you're by yourself? Do you ever prefer to be by yourself?
Oh, me?
Yeah. Or David?
I wouldn't say that's like a perfect state of being, just because, eventually I get bored.
Do you ever prefer to be by yourself, though?
Yeah, every now and then.
Okay. So there could be a state of being in which you prefer to be by yourself. Well, the difference
I wouldn't call it perfect, but yeah.
In the Trinitarian conception, that's impossible, because the Father is always with the Son and vice versa. So they never have an opportunity to be alone. So I could say, well, that's actually a negative, because in the case of Allah, he experiences, quote unquote, experiences being alone. And then he also experiences being related to other beings. But in the case of the Trinity, he only experiences relation. He never experiences being alone.
No. So this is great. Now, the difference is that there's actually a contextual reason why I would say I occasionally prefer to be alone, right? It's the same reason why some atheists actually use an argument against God wholesale by saying, well, you see, privacy is a good thing, right? And so therefore, God knowing all things is bad because privacy is a good thing. You and I would both say to the atheist, well, no, privacy is only something we desire because we live in a world with people that we don't trust. Right. So or we have things to hide, or more likely than not, we live in a world where we don't trust people with information. And so that context is the reason that humans currently see privacy as a good thing. But obviously in a perfect world, we wouldn't see that. So you and I would probably say that to the atheist, right?
I mean, there's a lot of things I would say to the atheist, to be honest.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of issues with atheism, obviously. But
yeah, but for me, it's not only about privacy, but even if I granted that, right? Going back to your example, right? You said that the idea of the Trinitarian God being in this relationship, what explains why that relationship is the case? You said that it's a brute fact, right?
Well, yeah, God just exists as a Trinity, right? And that's just like, God has the maximal state of relationality and in the most simple form there.
Why is that the case? Why is it the case, and why does he exist as three persons? You said earlier because it's a brute fact. That's what I understood you said. Okay, yeah. So if it's a brute fact, that means there is no deeper explanation for that. There's no deeper explanation.
Well, yeah, for the fact of God existing eternally as a relationship, but the fact of God therefore enjoying or seeing relationship as a good thing would flow from that. So that wouldn't be a brute fact, right? The brute fact is his existence. In the same way you would say Allah, his existence is just like a brute fact, right? I would say the existence of God as such, as triune, is just a brute fact. His eternal understanding of that is a good thing, because God sees all things about himself as good and perfect, would flow from the brute fact of his existence.
Right. So it flows from the brute fact of his existence. And I can just say in a like manner that Allah's brute fact of desiring a relation with created beings is a brute fact. And the fact that he does actually have that relation with them flows from his brute fact of that desire.
Now, so I understand
there's nothing's changed here. One is a brute fact based upon an eternal desire that Allah has. And another is based upon a brute eternal experience that the Trinitarian God has. There's no further explanation for why we should prefer one brute fact over another, because from both brute facts, the same result occurs. There's no difference.
No. So the big issue, and you even said it in your wording, right, is that God's understanding in the Trinitarian concept, God's belief or view or evaluation that it is good to be in relationship is grounded in the brute fact of his existence. He doesn't have to look to the future, or he doesn't have to look to creatures as an explanation for why he would see that.
It's also in Allah's brute existence.
So you're saying the fact of the future existence of creatures is a brute fact?
I'm saying that God's disposition to be related to other creatures is a brute fact.
Okay, but like where? So it's just eternally
then
there.
You're asking where does that come from, or what's the grounding for that? But there's no further grounding.
That's not what I'm. No, so now I just have to ask. Then that means he is dependent on his creation for that brute fact to like be actualized. That for him to finally, he's like, oh, it's just a brute fact in my existence that I want to be in a relationship, but now I have to wait for these creatures to exist.
It doesn't have to wait for anything. There's no waiting period going by. There's no waiting period going by.
I thought he had like actual non-timeless instantiations and actions. That's the whole argument. You said I was wrong at the beginning, is by claiming that he's timeless and static.
There's two different views, right? So if you're familiar with Ryan Mullen's view, there's God when he exists alone by himself. And then there is the second moment, which is the act of creation. There is no time gap in between. There's no ongoing, wondering, oh my God, I'm so lonely. When am I going to have the creation? No, it's one moment, and then there's the second moment. There's not these infinite series of moments in between. That's one view. And then you could also take another view that there could be an infinite regress of moments, and that God was always related to creation.
No, correct me if I'm wrong, though. R.T. Mullins specifically argues that time is an attribute of God, right? And like the end of the timeless God. So he says that time is just always like a present reality with God, not so much like one moment God exists and the next moment is creation, but that just like time is this eternal attribute of God. Isn't that what he argues?
No, so time is an attribute of God, but by it being an attribute of God, he means that God is and I'm just citing this from memory, so it might not be verbatim, but God is the source of all moments. God is also the source for the ordering of all moments and all change. Okay, and in light of that, he's not saying that there's not different moments of time, but the way he sees it is moments are like states of affairs. Right. So like moment one is the state of affair where God is existing alone by himself. Moment two is God and creation. And moment three is whatever develops after that first aspect of creation, so on and so forth. That's his view of moments of time. So he doesn't deny moments of time. God is in one moment of time eternally, if so to speak, and then there's a second moment of time and a third moment of time. So I'm saying you could defend that view if you wanted to, which you said you were somewhat sympathetic to. And in that case, if I took that view, there's no like major gap of time where God is like waiting and wondering like, oh my God, when am I going to be related to creatures? No, there's one moment, second moment. And then also, you could also take the other view where there's a infinite series or regress of moments, and God is always related to individual creatures.
Okay, so which view do you think then you would be most sympathetic to amongst those two?
Well, I think there are other factors.
What would fit best, do you think?
I think there are other factors related to this question, but I prefer the second view.
Okay, like eternal regression of moments. So you would say that there's like this kind of infinite regression of moments prior to there being creatures in the life of...
My position is that God has always been creating one thing after another, and that there was not a first thing created, so to speak. That's my personal position.
Wait. Okay, so like how does that relate to the Quran and the descriptions of creation in the Quran?
Like what, for example?
Well, I just thought that, I don't know, there's like a point where the heavens were made and the earth and then, the waters.
Sure. So the view is that every particular thing that's created has a beginning in time, but the regress or the sort of abstraction of creation, it doesn't. There's not a first thing created in that sense. It just goes back and back and back and back. God's been creating one thing after another.
So like the act of creation is like an eternal thing.
Again, each individual act is temporal, and each effect of that temporal act is temporal. But God has always been creating.
All right, I'm gonna have to like. I don't know.
This is not also, by the way, this is not an obscure view. This is actually Ibn Taymiyyah's view. So, David, I think you're learning some things. Maybe it'll be some future ammo for you. I don't know. But this is actually Ibn Taymiyyah's view that, and it actually gets around everything you said. And I think it's superior for other reasons, but that would go into things related to arbitrariness and anyway, I don't want to get too far down the line, but the point is that this is a view in the Islamic tradition where God has been creating one thing after another. The series, so to speak, which is an abstraction in the mind, is eternal, but no individual particular thing is eternal. Each thing has a beginning in time. And if you're familiar with his name is escaping me at the moment. I'll think of it in a second. But there's a Christian philosopher. Oh my God, I don't know how I'm not remembering his name. There's a Christian philosopher who wrote on this topic about infinite regresses. And he actually mentions that there are some regresses which are so-called vicious or problematic, and there are others that are not. Now, he doesn't hold the particular view that I mentioned, but he doesn't think that the typical arguments that are used against infinite regresses are successful against the model that I mentioned.
Okay. So at least in like Allah's perspective, there has always been something with him, since in like the abstraction of Allah's mind, there's always been a thing he's been creating. Like there's never been a point where he hasn't been creating something. So even if things are made in time from Allah's perspective, there's always been something with him that he's created.
I'm just trying to find this book really quickly. Can you say that again? Sorry.
Yeah. So just trying to understand this view, because
I actually have the book, but I'm not home. I'm in the U.S. right now. I'm actually traveling back to Morocco, so I don't have my my library with me.
That's okay.
Yeah. So go ahead. What was the question?
Yeah. So just to understand this view about all these things being made in time, but Allah has always been making. He's always been creating a thing. So has there, like from Allah's perspective, has he ever been without some sort of created thing?
In that sense, no, there wouldn't be.
Okay. So like there's always been something with him in Allah's perspective.
In the sense of, for example, if you think of, the easiest way to think about it is, let's take this moment of time of the heavens and earth and creation.
Sure.
And then prior to that, let's say he was creating that state of affair prior to that, and back and back and back. And you can kind of zoom in on individual things. Now, God can, for example, he can create something and then completely destroy whatever exists at the time, and then create something else in its place. So that's not a problem. But in terms of him creating one thing after another, yeah, this view would say that he was always doing that.
And so there's always been like, yeah, he could destroy something right after creating it, but that isn't necessarily the case, right? Like there's always been something actually with him because he's always been creating something.
There's never been one particular thing that was with him, though.
Well, yeah, okay. So how do we know that, though? Like, how do we know with necessity that Allah destroys each thing after he creates each thing?
Well, it depends what you mean. I'm representing a theological view, right? I'm explaining a theological position. I'm not just basing this purely off of reason or anything like that. The claim is that God creates things through other things. So he can create one thing and then through that destroy that prior creation and create something else out of it. And the thing that exists afterwards is totally different than the prior thing that he created from. And there's nothing that's sharing anything similar in between. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see any problem with that. You can just think of it as a chain, right? There's a chain of creations going back and back and back. And each point in the chain or each break in the chain is created and has a beginning in time. I don't see any problem with that. I mean, it's just God is creating one thing after another.
Yeah, it just...
But anyway, this is just one view. What I'm saying is you still have the Mullins view, which also escapes your problem. There's no kind of waiting in between. There's just one moment God by himself, second moment God in creation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Mullins view, though, does still say that there's like real moments, real like succession, right? And so there is still like
there's no succession in the moment, right? The moment is like a screenshot. It's like a snapshot. There's no succession in between the first moment and the second moment, because if there were, then that second moment would have to be prior. You're just going from one moment to the next moment. There's no time gap or succession of moments in between the two moments. Okay. So there's no waiting.
I'll have to put that in my head. I'll have to look that up later. I really thought he had a different view that would have allowed for like time to just be this eternal attribute of God, and therefore making him like purely active without any change, sans or post creation.
So Mullins' view is that time does not require change, that you could have time without change. That's his view. And so God existing alone by himself without any change, that is one moment of time, because it's a state of affairs. He cashes it out in states of affairs. Okay. And then the second moment of time is the second state of affairs, where it's God and creation. That's it.
Okay.
There's no, in the first moment, there aren't other moments going by. It's just one moment, God existing alone by himself. No succession. There's no succession whatsoever.
Okay. All right. I think I can see how that works, but of course yours would be more towards the second view, which still leads to...
I'm saying both views escape any sort of problem about God being lonely and waiting, like a long time to have a friend or something like that. Astaghfirullah, but there's nothing like that.
Yeah, I'll have to think on that further. I mean, I think we've had a pretty good set of conversations here, but
I think my main problem with you, David, was that you were representing the so-called Wahhabi view as a seemingly, let's say, timeless view and immutable view of God, and almost making it seem like a divine simplicity type of view. And it's totally the opposite of that. That's the thing that I really wanted to talk about. And also, go ahead.
Yeah, and I can understand that. I tried to avoid holding to some sort of divine simplicity in the critique, really just saying that it seems as though if this is a will that must occur, right, this universal will, as we showed in the slide, and that's like something that you agree about, the Wahhabis agree about, then that means that his will, since it must occur, is like an immutable will. And as you said, while we talked about that, it's an eternal will, which means it's an eternal immutable will. But if it's an eternal immutable will, then it would seem to imply the exact critique that I was saying by your very definition.
I don't see that, because, I mean, everybody's, unless you're holding to some type of, let's say, knowledge of God that is dynamic, in the sense of God doesn't really know what he's